Welcome back. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and indeed since I've done anything on Seeking Eye really. Even though I've kept the channel going, I haven't had time to sit down and record for a while. Just things in personal life that have been going on, and it's just taken time away. So many other projects on the go. I'm now learning how to code websites and things like that. One reason I'm doing that is because I'm also working on my fiction novel properly this time. I started it a while ago after thinking one day, I wonder if I can write a book. I might have a go, and that was like 2 years ago. But I've started putting proper time into that now, as well as developing a website for it way before it's finished, but getting it ready. So I definitely need to get that written and finished, because that's been taking up a lot of time recently. So I'm here now to look at this video here. It's called Neil Degrasse Tyson on Death and Near-Death Experiences. I've referenced Neil Degrasse Tyson a few times as an example of a good skeptic, a good example of a skeptic who, although is obviously skeptical on the subject of near-death experiences, in my opinion, although he's a great scientist as an astronomer, when it comes to near-death experiences, if you haven't done the work and the research and the years in that specific subject, you're not really in a position to talk much about it, to give an opinion. Or, well, you can give an opinion, of course, but you can't give an educated opinion. You can't give kind of statements of fact, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is have a look at this video, because this is one I haven't actually seen before, with Neil Degrasse Tyson. I've seen clips of this in other videos and such, but I'm going to watch this one and just let you know what I think.
One of the things we know from research in psychology, as well as just practical matters in the conducting of scientific experiments, is that one of the lowest forms of evidence you could possibly invoke is eyewitness testimony. Which is odd, because it's one of the highest forms of evidence in the court of law, which disturbs me greatly. Mm-hmm. So if you come from a lab to a science conference and say, this is true, and we say, how do you know this? Because I saw it. Well, that's really the end of your talk, and you just leave. And then we say, come back when you have a chart recorder, or you have to just give me something that does not have to flow through your senses, because your senses is some of the worst data-taking devices. This is the idea that I suppose you can add on to it, that anecdotal evidence is a very low form of evidence, and eyewitness testimony is I suppose a version of that. And it's true when you're talking about kind of one-off or very small number of people seeing something and then concluding something about it, like I saw a light in the sky. I and a group of friends saw a light in the sky. We don't know what that was. We think it was a UFO because it didn't look like a plane or a helicopter or anything. Fair enough, but there's hundreds of other things it could have been. Unless you got a very clear picture of it and the aliens driving it, I'm not going to take your word for it. And even if you did show me a picture of the aliens driving it, I'm going to say, well, how do you know it's not someone doing a reconnaissance mission dressed as an alien to take people off the track? So with that, yeah, eyewitness testimonies in science are very difficult to take as reasonable forms of evidence, especially in the physical sciences, which rely on measurements and consistency of measurements. It becomes more difficult when you get to psychological aspects, because therapies and various other psychological treatments, etc., rely on, and even to some degree, or to a major degree really, the effectiveness and the rollout of pharmaceuticals relies on eyewitness testimony and anecdotal evidence in order to gauge side effects, effectiveness, efficiency, or rather efficacy, and things like that, especially with talk therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that. You rely on the feedback from the person undergoing it to determine whether it's the right course, whether it works, whether it doesn't, what's the benefits, what are the drawbacks, what are the limitations, etc. They all rely on feedback. The difference being that you have huge samples of people, huge numbers of people that are all saying the same thing, in which case it becomes more of a series of case studies as opposed to individual anecdotal stories, I suppose. That exist. And science did not achieve maturity. Modern science did not achieve maturity until we had instruments that either extended our senses or replaced them.
when talking in the physical sciences.
And Galileo, it's not an accident that we have modern science, as I've described it, experiment, verification, these tactics, these methods and tools, began with Galileo and Francis Bacon, and Galileo was around 1600. That was the invention in that period of the microscope and the telescope. So it's not an accident that all this sort of came together at that time. So now we have people who are in the act of dying, and they come back from life, and they report on mental experiences. And that's intriguing.
Potentially mental, however, and a lot of them will be mental cases in such as brain-created phenomena. However, we can't say that about all of them because a lot of experiences and a lot of very well documented experiences happen when the brain is not in a position to create any form of consciousness, let alone verifiable perceptions.
It's intriguing. But because it is in the realm of eyewitness testimony, you can establish it perhaps as a personal truth. But it will take more than that to establish it as an objective truth.
Such as veridical perception and the fact that we're talking multi millions of people, and up to 20% of all those who have come near death have had a near-death experience, and that's not including those that have never reported it. I can't remember what the exact percentage of the population as a whole who are believed to experience a near-death experience. I think it's not much less, and it's still very, very considerable. So we're kind of out of the realm now in terms of sheer numbers. We're out of the realms of anecdotal eyewitness accounts. We're more into a worldwide case study of a phenomena that is repeated, that has repeated factors which are always the same. Some differences certainly, but that are always the same at the foundational experience. So to say that these are now eyewitness testimonies only, in a way of saying it's not good evidence, I think is not a fair assessment to make. Add to that the veridical perceptions that people have that they shouldn't have, even if they were awake and alert and fully aware, fully conscious, seeing things through walls and seeing things in far distance, seeing things across time, seeing things that happen in the future, in the past, before they existed. Things like that even if you were awake and alert, you shouldn't be able to see. But they can see these things near death, and verifiably so.
And an objective truth is the kind of truths that science discovers. And it's the kind of truth that is true whether or not you believe in it. Okay? It exists outside of your culture, your religion, your political affiliation. Personal truths, if I may consider that, would be, okay, Jesus is your Savior. That's your personal truth. You cannot convince someone else that Jesus is their Savior in an objective way.
I'm not sure whether I would call that a personal truth. I'd call it maybe a personal belief or a personal faith, but a personal truth is difficult because truth entails that it's true regardless of what you believe and what you don't believe. It could certainly be a personal truth that Jesus is your saviour, if he is your saviour, and if what you believe about him existing and what he was is true. But otherwise, there's no way of knowing that. So the only thing you can really say is that it's a personal belief and a personal, I suppose you could say it's a personal truth for you if you honestly believe it. But to me, using that word truth is difficult because it suggests that there is a fundamental truth behind it. I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of definitions, to be honest with you.
To persuade them, you have to persuade them in some cases by war, right? Look at the wars that have been fought between religions that did not agree about who was their respective saviors.
Which is why I don't agree with religion and organised religion.
Sure.
Although if I walked on water, made you unblind, created loaves and fishes out of nothing,
that would be amazing.
I think,
and we would investigate that, and we would say, "Whoa!" Yes, we would. It would be an amazing thing. And then if we cannot account for that by any other known laws of physics, and it's only happening with you, we'd wonder if you were like alien or something first, right? But no, it would be.
They wouldn't. The first thing most scientists or skeptics certainly would think is you've proven, you've proven that you're a good magician, that you've had this marvelous trick you've discovered. You say it's real, but we know it can't be real. So, what's the trick? Basically, there's no way you'd jump straight to aliens or paranormal phenomena. Even if it is, you'd immediately. I think few scientists, or very few, if any, skeptics, or say skeptics, I mean, the debunkers out there, would say it's definitely a trick. We don't know how it works, but it can't be anything else.
So easy to demonstrate divinity, if in fact.
And to add to that, that's exactly what we've seen happen with near-death experiences and veridical perceptions. We've shown that they happen. We've measured that they happen. We've reported that they happen in huge, in large numbers, in huge numbers. Plus those that have statistically very, very likely happened and have never been reported. And we've got these in, scientific journals, peer-reviewed journals, as well as other parapsychological phenomena and various other, I suppose, psi phenomena, like remote viewing and out-of-body visual perception or veridical perception and things like that. These have all been demonstrated to occur in a way that is statistically far beyond chance, statistically significant. And yet, and they have been written up in journals and presented, and yet still we're faced with it must be an illusion, it must be something we're missing, rather than, no, this phenomena happens. Maybe it's time we expand our scope of science to incorporate them and to try and explain them, rather than just explain them away by our current science, which may be too limited to account for these things, because they may take place in a framework of reality that isn't physical, isn't necessarily mental or emotional, or if it is physical or mental, then it's a kind of a higher, try and think of a word, a higher form of that, a form beyond our ability to currently understand. But immediately we're met with, that can't be true. There is a physical explanation. We just haven't found it yet.
You had the power you wanted to display. Mm-hmm. But getting back to the gentleman's point, so part of this issue is, what does it mean to be dead? Okay, it used to be, did you fog a mirror that was held up in front of you while you were laying there on your bed? All right, and if you didn't fog the mirror, you were judged to be dead. They would put you in a coffin, and in some parts, it is told, there's a string that they put into the coffin as they buried you, and they put it over a tree branch and connected to a bell. If you woke up,
you ring the bell and they come and dig you out.
You would pull the string, and that's where you get the term dead ringer, okay? You would pull the string, and you come rescue me because you buried a living person, okay? So, then it was you're dead because your heart stopped. Well, we know why a heart beats. It's electrochemical. So you do pa-chunk, the heart beats again. We got that one, okay? Well, is it when you're brain dead? Well, you can be brain dead, but your heart is still beating. And we can.
However, if you're brain dead, then by all correlations we have, and although correlation isn't causation, there's certainly a correlation between brain activity amount and type of brain activity and consciousness. If you're brain dead, where you have no reading from the brain at all, certainly not enough of a level to be correlated with consciousness, then you're not aware anymore. And you can, if you don't intervene and resolve that state where brain activity can come back through various means, CPR and other things, to get blood flow back to the brain and to allow that electrical activity to continue. If you don't intervene at that point, naturally, I think it's very, 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 very likely, if not impossible, that you're gonna come back to life from brain death. And the point is, we regardless of what you'd call dead or not, if there's no brain activity, if you're brain dead, you're not conscious. You're certainly not more conscious than you are when you're awake, and you certainly should not be able to see things that are verified later as true in the room, outside the country, outside the state, outside the present time. You shouldn't be able to go and visit people that are dead that you didn't know to be dead and then find out later that they were dead. You shouldn't be able to meet siblings that were aborted before you were born, that your parents never told you about or nobody ever told you about. Meet them and then find out that, yes, you did have a sibling who was aborted before birth. That sort of thing shouldn't happen, whether you have brain activity or not. But they do, which is the intriguing thing. But yes, being able or not seeing your breath on a mirror or on a pane of glass isn't a good indicator for whether you're dead or not, because of course your heart could still be beating, your brain could still be active, you're just not breathing. Your heart stopping isn't a good indicator of death, because cardiac arrest can be reversed. Brain death is a better idea of death, or a better determination of death, because at that point you're very, 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 very deeply unconscious, and unless you intervene, there's really no coming back from that. But not a perfect one, because it is still reversible with the right intervention, I believe. I suppose to define death itself is very, very difficult, but that's not what we're interested in. We're interested in what's the brain state, is it able to create consciousness? If not, why is there still consciousness, and why is there veridical perception taking place, which shouldn't be happening either, whether the brain is not active or even if it is active, shouldn't be possible. So that's what we're interested in.
Keep you alive. Are you dead yet? Well, no, because your heart's still beating. Is your brain functioning? No. Okay, I can tell you this, that if you're dead long enough so that your brain is deprived oxygen, and then we bring you back, you're not talking about seeing any lights because your brain dead, okay? So, plus, this often happens to someone who is deathly ill to begin with, and where are they? They're in a hospital. And if they go into cardiac arrest or something critical, they take you from your hospital bed to an operating table. And what is sitting above an operating table? Lights!
Problem is, it's not just a light that people describe. That's kind of the analogy, but they say it's much, 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 much more than a light. It's a being. It's a living emanation of, you say, love or acceptance or peace. It's exceptionally bright, beyond any sort of light you can imagine, brighter than the sun, brighter than any suns, they say. But it's so much more than just a light. And usually it's ineffable to people to describe what it is encountering, this entity, this thing. But it's certainly not just a hospital light. It far exceeds that. It far exceeds staring at the sun, for Christ's sake.
Bright lights, okay? And so if you say, oh, I was dead and I came back and I saw lights, maybe it's not all the cases, but it's many of the cases, okay? Now, there were skeptics who tried to do an experiment. There are people who say they left their body, and they saw, we got some of those.
Montesquieu.
So here's what they did. When was Montesquieu?
He got rear-ended by some guy on a horse, fell
So he's going to talk about all the experiments that have been done and haven't yielded positive results.
off, flew up into
imagine.
the air, looked down at himself in agony, watched his wife
Wait,
come
they had
over.
rear-end collisions in the era of horses?
Montaigne, not
Still,
Montesquieu.
they had rear-end collisions in the era of
Well,
horses?
you ride a horse with a guy behind you who's riding too fast. It's like a cab situation.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay. Okay. So,
We still have
I
rear
didn't know
engine
that.
Well,
horses.
I love stopping you mid-sentence.
Rear-end collision with the horses. Where was I? So there was an experiment. So there's some descriptions that are part of this near-death experience literature where they come above and they see themselves down there on the bed, okay? So what they decided to do is, for people who are about to die, they would write a message facing upwards to the ceiling above the bed and suspend it there. So if a person goes above their bed and looks down, they'd be able to read the message. So when they rejoin their body, they should then tell us what message they saw. That's never happened. It's just...
Recent study, the AWARE study, yielded a positive result, a auditory hit. So someone heard an auditory stimulant or stimulation. No visual hits, and it's a good demonstration of why this sort of experiment doesn't work. So, the main thing is, if you're out of your body, You're not looking around for a target. You're thinking, why am I outside my body? Am I dead? I'm panicking. And then you're off somewhere. Usually in the typical chronology of a near-death experience, you usually find yourself out of your body, then you go off to these transcendent environments, whatever they are. They could be completely in your mind. Who knows? We can't prove one way or another, which is why I like the veridical perception aspect of things, because it implies that these other environments could be genuine places. But that's the first thing. If you're out of your body, I'm not looking at targets unless I'm directed to do so, which you can see in Penny Sartori's study, where one of the experiencers said, well, I was out of my body. I wasn't looking for a target. If you'd have told me about a target beforehand, I would have looked and told you what it was. The other reason is with this study, the AWARE study, 2,000 participants. Let me bring up the stats. Okay, so here, this is on awareofaware.co. The results from the AWARE 2 study, as the abstract states, 567 patients were recruited, but only 53 survived to discharge. So 53 people survived out of the full set of people. And of these, only 28 were investigated. So we've gone from 567 patients to 28. I think the initial sample size was 2,000 people. And now we're at 28. So 28 people that are researchable and that are interviewed. So how many reported awareness? 11 of the 28 people had memories or perceptions. So now we're down to 11. 6 reported transcendent experiences of death, which, fair enough, we're not particularly interested in that. We're interested in the veridical perception. 2 reported CIPRIC, which is, I think, CPR-induced... Oh, I can't remember. Hang on. I don't seem to be able to find it, but it's effectively, I think, the 2 reported cardiac, CPR-induced consciousness. 2 had memories post-CPR. 3 had dreams or dreamlike experiences. Now, the transcendent experience of death. So the 6 out of 28 people is where Parnia, who's the leader of this study, gets his 20% having near-death experiences. So 6 out of 28 had near-death experiences, which gives you a 20% or 21% figure for those who have been close to death due to cardiac arrest and have reported a near-death experience. So out of the 28, 2 people had auditory out-of-body experiences, so they heard things going on around them. 1 had a visual out-of-body experience. None of 28 were able to identify the correct image. 1 was able to identify the correct fruit from the auditory stimuli, so an audio cue said, I'd imagine, the name of a fruit, and one person was able to hear that. And 1 person had a visual out-of-body experience. So from 2,000 initial people in the study, we have 1 person who had a visual out-of-body experience and was interviewed. That's why, another big reason why the previous studies were very unlikely to ever succeed, because the number of people you would need in order to acquire a decent sample size, which statistically would likely give a hit, is huge. Let me just double check again that 2,000 figure, because I'm curious as to where that 500 figure came from. Maybe the 2,000 was AWARE 1. It looks like when they proposed this in 2014, we proposed a 2-year multi-center observational study of 900 to 1,500 patients. So, okay, so the sample was maybe then, the initial sample was maybe then that 567. So even so, 567 patients, 1 person had a visual experience and was interviewed about it. So 1 in 567 people. That's, the number of people you'd have to have a good sample of people to have a chance of someone observing the targets would be huge. And I'm guessing that the studies that Neil Degrasse Tyson here is referencing didn't have anywhere near that number, since this AWARE study is probably the biggest that's ever been done. My timer just went off to tell me to fold my sourdough bread dough, so let's get back. Where were we? I forget now.
No. That's enough. Now, That's never happened. So when they rejoin their body,
Oh, the studies.
they should then tell us what message they saw. That's never happened. It's just no. That's
It has happened. Charles Tart and replicated, allegedly, by Stanley Krippner. I've never seen the replication. I don't know if it was published or not, but coming from Stanley Krippner himself, to me, he said he has replicated this this Charles Tart experiment. Not very useful because, of course, there's no if he did, and there's no record of it, it's not provable. I think he said there was a record, but I don't know. I wasn't able to find it. Charles Tart Miss Z or Miss Z experiment. He found a seasoned out-of-body experiencer who could go out of the body at will. Stuck her with all these electrodes and put as many security measures in as possible. It wasn't completely robust, which is why it's often dismissed. Again, I've spoken to Charles Tart, and he is adamant as you can possibly be, that there's no way she cheated, there's no way she falsified the results, there's no way effectively she could see the target in any way unless she had a mirror kind of hidden somewhere. But he said all the electrodes and everything were set up to measure any movement. There's no way she would have been able to get a mirror out, see it at a certain angle, it wasn't at the right angle, things like that. But because it wasn't scientifically perfectly stringent, it's often dismissed. And the fact that, Charles Tart, who did the experiment, thinks it's laughable that there are any skeptical explanations to what happened, tells me a great deal. Again, it's not useful because it's his word, but Charlie Tart, he's not going to falsify just for the sake of being right. He's not going to falsify results or lack any, miss any details of security measures that could have been. He would have divulged any weakness, and he outright said there's no way she faked this. And it was effectively exactly what Neil Degrasse Tyson said. They put a target of a 6-digit, 8-digit, 6-digit, a string of numbers on a shelf out of view of where this Miss Z was laying on a table or on a bed or laying on something. Eyes closed, etc. Electrodes all round. She said she came out of the body. She saw the number. This is what the number was, and it was digit for digit exactly what it was. Now, the reason probably that succeeded and the others didn't is because, or the others that Neil Degrasse Tyson was mentioning, is because those studies were on. He's talking about those that undergo cardiac arrest. For example, the Sampania study, the AWARE study. So these are effectively random people who come near to death and may or may not have an out-of-body experience. The Miss Z experiment included someone who was adept at going out of body at will, and I don't think they did it straight away. I think it took a few nights for her to have an out of body experience, even though she was a seasoned out of body experiencer. If you read Robert Monroe's books as well as other out of body experiences books, or talk to them, they'll tell you, well, you can't talk to Robert Monroe, he's dead, or maybe you can if you can go out of body, but they'll say it's not, you can't get it 100% every time. It's still kind of a random, will it happen, will it not? There are ways you can prepare to go out of body, but it's not guaranteed to happen every time. More likely if you practice and get the technique down, but still it kind of is determined that night if you go out of body or not. So I think it still took her a few nights, but she did get out of body. She did see the target, and it was number for number exactly what it was. And as I say, according to Dr. Stan Krippner himself, he has replicated that. I can't find the replication, as I say, so I can't show you that. So you're going to have to take my word, and I've taken Dr. Krippner's word. I see no reason why he would lie. But make of that what you will. So yes, these experiments have been done among others, and they have shown statistically significant results. And they have, unless you query their honesty or the scrutiny of the measures done, they have seem to have shown veridical out-of-body travel.
No. Now, I have a cousin who, when her father died, was alone with him in the room, and he's in an open casket. And she's otherwise completely rational, okay? I'm not saying this is a crazy person. Completely, she's a real estate agent, okay?
Speaks for itself.
Okay. Among other okay. So she's in there. She tells me of a conversation she had with her dead father. And I said, was it in your mind? No, he sat up and spoke to her. I said, what was the conversation? And she said, well, he said, don't worry about him. He's in a better place, this sort of thing. So this is her eyewitness testimony. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm just saying
No, but it's not verifiable either. That's just your standard kind of, I love you, I'm in a better place. It may have happened. That may have genuinely been a communication. I don't know. I wasn't there. But there's nothing in that we can refer back to and verify in any possible way, because it's all just a subjective message. Whereas a video I was editing recently for IANS showed an example of a guy, John Wigglesworth. He had a near-death experience where he saw his father. It's different from this because his cousin's wasn't a near-death experience, but it's still a communication. But with this example, it was verifiable because his father, he'd been looking for his father's gun for a long, long, long time and looked everywhere in the house, and he couldn't find it. So he gave up. But then he had this near-death experience, and his father came through to him and said, I know you're looking for the gun. It's wedged behind a cabinet in the basement. Just, go down at the basement, look to the cabinet on the right-hand side of the wall or whatever it was, move it apart. The gun, I wedged the gun down there. I never told anyone it was down there, but I wedged it down there. I'm assuming he never told anyone because nobody knew to look there. As I say, he'd looked all the way around the house. Never even thought to look behind, wedged behind a cabinet. No one would have thought of that. So after his near-death experience, he recovered, went back to the house, went into the basement, moved aside the cabinet, and there was the gun wedged exactly where the father said it was. Now that is a verifiable piece of information that comes from a near-death or an after-death communication, and there are plenty. There's a plethora of cases of verifiable after-death communication with something like Neil Degrasse Tyson's cousin. Although it may have happened, there's no way of backing up the information because what he said to her is all subjective. I love you, I'm in a better place, don't worry about me. There's no way of verifying that. Which is why, to me, those examples aren't strong evidence of any kind of survival or continuation or communication.
it's not scientifically useful. That's all I'm really saying here, okay?
He's quite right.
I told her, next time this happens, ask these questions and not those questions, okay?
Easier said than done when you're grieving, though. When you're grieving, this is why false mediums and false psychics are very good at taking advantage of you, because they know that you're grieving, they know what you want to hear. I'm okay, I'm in a better place, don't worry about me, I love you, don't worry about the money. It's always don't worry about the money, because everybody worries about money. And that's the sort of thing that, that takes it away from the genuine mediums. And there are genuine mediums, I believe. If you look at the Wimbridge Institute research and the papers done on the quadruple blind studies there, again, statistically very significant that there are genuine mediumistic abilities and mediumship communication out there. But having that sort of information, I love you, bloody, blah, 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 people will take advantage of you when you're grieving because you don't think to ask the verifiable questions. You only want, reassurance that your loved one's still with you.
Don't say, are you happy? No, saying, are you wearing clothes? Where are you?
That's not verifiable either, because if they say I'm in the afterlife, or I'm wearing clothes, well, how are you going to prove that? Ask about something that is taking place on Earth. Where's the gun? Can you leave me a penny in this particular area? What can you tell me that I can go back and look up and find?
Where did you get your clothes? What temperature is it? Just ask questions. Like, this is an amazing scientific experiment you could be performing.
But none of those questions are scientific because you can't verify any of them. How do you verify what temperature it is in an environment where dead people are? because we can't measure anything in that realm unless we go ourselves. We haven't got the equipment to measure that. So where are you? What temperature is it? Where did you buy your clothes? Are you wearing clothes? There's no way of verifying these. That's not a good scientific approach. You ask things about this environment where we can measure and we can verify things. Where's the gun? If they say to you, you had a sister who was aborted at birth, ask your mother about it. We never told you. Go back, you can ask your mother, and yes, that's true. You verified the information. Where did you get your clothes from in the afterlife? How would you possibly determine whether that's true? I could say I got it from a large teepee on the side of the river, where I am. Okay, what can I do to prove that? Especially if these afterlife environments are based on one's beliefs, which they seem to be, and one's own kind of mental architecture, that means that every environment is going to be slightly different for everybody. Again, there's no way of providing evidence for that. So I think Neil Degrasse Tyson is not looking at that scientifically, even though he seems to claim that he is.
So that's my lesson to all of you. That if you find yourself...
But my point being, that's more than understandable, because although Neil Degrasse Tyson is a very, very good scientist and very, very good with his astrophysics and physics, and I think he's mainly an astrophysicist. But when it comes to near-death experiences, you're not a scientist of near-death experiences. You're not a mechanic. I wouldn't come to you to fix my car. I wouldn't come to you to ask for your advice on near-death experiences. I'd come to ask your advice on astrophysics, because you're an astrophysicist. I wouldn't ask a mechanic to come around and knock a hole in my door or knock a hole in my wall. I'll ask a builder. Doesn't matter how brilliant you are and how smart you are, you're brilliant and smart in a very specialised subject. Unless you're a GP. But then even so, that you're still specialising in medicine. I wouldn't ask a GP to come and knock a hole in my wall. But you specialise in one particular area. Don't go to Neil Degrasse Tyson for near-death experiences. Go to Bruce Grayson, go to Jan Holden, go to Pim Van Lommel, go to people that have researched it for 30 years and have specialised in that subject and know the science inside and out. Because everything that Neil has said is perfectly logical from the point of view of someone who hasn't looked at this stuff. But it doesn't work when you've researched the literature inside and out and know of the case studies, know of the prospective and retrospective studies done, and know of the results they yield, and know of the mediumship experiences or the mediumship experiments done by Julie Byshell, and know all this sort of thing. You need to focus on that particular area to have a good understanding, to have the context of why we believe what we believe. Otherwise, you can just dismiss anything.
In that situation, okay? Because if a dead person sits up and starts talking to me, oh my God, my iPhone is coming out. I'm getting chart recorder.
If that happens, you're out of that room. I'm pretty damn sure I would be out of that room, terrified, and probably urine running down my leg. I think anybody would be.
I'm going to be all...
Then again, his cousin didn't, so maybe you wouldn't be. I suppose if you're in that much grief. But there are cases where people have sat up after they've died in a coffin. That's usually because one of the stents that keeps them in place has shifted, and it's because I think usually they're kind of pinned down into a laying position. So when that pin gives way, sometimes just structurally it can go boom, and that would freak me out. But that has happened.
Up in that as an experimenter. Okay.
So thank you for watching. That was my thoughts on Neil Degrasse Tyson on death and near-death experiences. Let me know if you agree, if you disagree, what you agree and disagree on. And I will see you in the next one. Hopefully I'll do a few more of these in the time that I currently have, but maybe not, because I've still got a lot of work to do in various different things. If you're interested in fiction, I've had a couple of preliminary reviews on my book as far as it's gone. It's still very early, but if you're interested, go to my Facebook page called Russet the Bush Tale, which kind of probably gives away what it's about, but have a look, let me know what you think, and if you want a copy of the early version, I'm always looking for reviews. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.